Portrait of a Romantic. H. Colin Davis presents the poetry of John Tessimond, read by Rosalind Shanks and Gabriel Wolfe. Portrait of a Romantic.
He is in love with the land that is always over the next hill and the next, with the bird that is never caught, with the room beyond the looking-glass. He likes the half-hid, the half-heard, the half-lit, the man in the fog, the road without an ending, stray pieces of torn words to piece together. He is well aware that man is always lonely, listening for an echo of his cry, crying for the moon, making the moon his mirror, weeping in the night. He often dives in the deep sea undertow of the dark and dreaming mind. He turns at corners, twists on his heel to trap his following shadow. He is haunted by the face behind the face. He searches for last frontiers and lost doors. He tries to climb the wall around the world.
That was the voice of the poet John Tessimond reading his poem Portrait of a Romantic, a self-portrait of a sad, amusing, lonely, charming and utterly honest man. When he died in 1962, not long before his 60th birthday, his friend Hubert Nicholson, the novelist and poet, wrote, "He had never lost a touch of the boyish and debonair. He was still romantic about London and Paris and nightlife and pretty girls. He still hoped for the impossible and believed in the goodness of total strangers." His output was not large. The Walls of Glass appeared in 1934 and Voices in a Giant City in 1947. A selection which contained the best of them won the Poetry Book Society choice for 1958. All of them are now inexplicably out of print, but a few of them, not necessarily the best, appear in the less august anthologies, and one of them is a certain favourite, even a subject for exam questions in schools.
Cats, no less liquid than their shadows, offer no angles to the wind. They slip, diminished neat, through loopholes less than themselves, will not be pinned to rules or rooted for journeys. Counter-attack with non-resistance. Twist, enticing through the curving fingers, and leave an angered, empty fist. They wait, obsequious as darkness, quick to retire, quick to return, admit no aim or ethics, flatter with reservations, will not learn to answer to their names, are seldom truly owned till shot and skinned. Cats, no less liquid than their shadows, offer no angles to the wind.
The facts of his life are not startling. He was born in Birkenhead in 1902 and seems to have received little affection from his parents, but found it in an adoring aunt. He went to Charterhouse, but ran away at 16 with the romantic idea of climbing the wall around his world and becoming a freelance journalist in London. It only lasted a few weeks, and to his credit, he returned to school and in due course went on and took a BA in English at Liverpool. His whole instinct was towards writing, and so he returned to London only to discover once again the harsh reality of earning a living by his pen. A disastrous attempt at accountancy was followed by a spell of teaching, but this soon revealed a lifelong dislike of small boys. He was getting a little warmer when he worked for a time in a bookshop, and he finally found his niche in advertising as a copywriter. With his love of words, stray pieces of torn words to piece together, he excelled at this ephemeral and basically dishonest art, and yet an art which other modern poets, such as Norman Cameron, have used as the springboard for their real vocation. He had a powerful streak of melancholy, and was a victim of recurrent depressions which he never allowed to find a way into his poetry, and with which he never burdened his friends. He just wanted life to be simpler, for there to be fewer barriers.
One day people will touch and talk, perhaps easily, and loving be natural as breathing, and warm as sunlight. And people will untie themselves, as string is unknotted, unfold and yawn and stretch and spread their fingers, unfurl, uncurl like seaweed returned to the sea. And work will be simple and swift as a seagull flying, and play will be casual and quiet as a seagull settling, and the clocks will stop, and no one will wonder or care or notice, and people will smile without reason, even in the winter, even in the rain.
London was his whole life and was the background of most of his poetry. He had no time for country matters. He loved it for its infinite variety, its streets, its squares, its nightlife, its pubs, all the different types and characters with whom he came in contact as he sauntered through it with his rolled umbrella.
I am the city of two divided cities, where the eyes of rich and poor collide and wonder, where the beggar's voice is low and unexpectant, and in clubs the feet of the servants are soft on the carpet, and the world's wind scarcely stirs the leaves of the Times. I am the reticent, the private city, the city of lovers hiding wrapped in shadows, the city of people sitting and talking quietly, beyond shut doors and walls as thick as a century, people who laugh too little and too loudly, whose tears fall inward, flowing back to the heart. I am the city whose fog will fall like a finger, gently erasing the anger of angles, the strident indecorous gesture, whose dusk will come like tact, like a change in the conversation, violet and indigo, with strings of lemon street lamps casting their pools into the pools of rain, as the notes of the piano are cast from the top-floor window into the square that is always Sunday afternoon.
He spent much time with psychoanalysts in a vain endeavour to sort himself out, but their inability to help him is devastatingly brought out in his poem, The Psychoanalyst.
His suit is good, his hands are white, he smiles all day and sleeps all night, because he's always, always right. He states his theory, you agree? Well then, of course it's plain to see that he is right as right can be. You disagree? Ah, that is mere resistance to the facts you fear. Truth is confirmed, the case is clear. So you are free as air to choose, take his advice or spurn his views, but heads he wins and tails you lose. His fees are large, his cares are light, his analytic eyes are bright, he glows with pride as well he might. The analyst is always right.
Perhaps because of the lack of maternal love in his early childhood, he found it difficult to make stable emotional relationships. He was a 20th century Edward Lear, always searching for his jumbly girl who he never found, but was constantly yet fleetingly in love with the glamour girls of the more sophisticated London scene. Some of his best poetry hauntingly expresses this deep romantic longing.
In love's dances, one retreats and one advances.
One grows warmer and one colder, one more hesitant, one bolder.
One gives what the other needed once or will need, now unheeded.
One is clenched, compact, ingrowing, while the other's melting, flowing.
One is smiling and concealing, while the other's asking, kneeling.
One is arguing or sleeping, while the other's weeping, weeping.
And the question finds no answer.
And the tune misleads the dancer.
And the lost look finds no other.
And the lost hand finds no brother.
And the word is left unspoken, till the theme and thread are broken. When shall these divisions alter? Echo's answer seems to falter.
Oh, the unperplexed, unvexed time, next time, one day, next time.
It was typical of him when he saw a travel poster one day of an extraordinarily attractive young Creole girl to rush off to the West Indies in search of her or an equally nubile substitute. The reality did not come up to his expectations, the heat surpassed them, and he returned disillusioned to his old hunting grounds. But it had one reward for the rest of us in his marvellously descriptive Jamaican bus ride, his only poem to be included in the Oxford Book of Modern Verse, where it more than holds its own.
The live fowl squatting on the grapefruit and bananas in the basket of the copper-coloured lady is gloomy but resigned. The 4 very large baskets on the floor are in everybody's way, as the conductor points out loudly, often, but in vain. 2 quadroon dandies are disputing who is standing on whose feet. When we stop, a boy vanishes through the door marked entrance. But those entering through the door marked exit are greatly hindered by the fact that when we started there were 20 standing, and another 10 have somehow inserted themselves into invisible crannies between dark, sweating body and body. With an odour of petrol both excessive and alarming, we hurtle hell for leather between crimson bougainvillea blossom and scarlet poinsettia, and miraculously do not run over 3 goats, 7 hens, and a donkey, as we pray that the driver has not fortified himself at Daisy's drinking saloon with more than 4 rums, or by the gods of Jamaica, this day is our last.
He was a man of extraordinary modesty about himself and his stature as a poet. In a letter which he wrote out of the blue to the novelist R.C. Hutchinson in 1950 to express his admiration for him as a writer, he introduced himself by saying, "My name won't convey anything unless you've dabbled a hell of a lot in the shallow waters of minor contemporary verse." This from a man with 2 much-praised volumes of verse to his credit, and who had been represented by 6 poems in Michael Roberts' New Signatures, which came out in 1934 and blew a great gust of fresh air into the literary scene and heralded the arrival of the new men like Auden and Spender. He doesn't belong to any school or cult, and in a rare moment of self-revelation he wrote with typical honesty, "When I first wrote verse I was a Liverpool undergraduate, discovering Eliot, Pound, Yeats, Aldous Huxley. I imitated like mad, worshipped incompatible gods, mixed Imagist wine with Vorticist brandy, got marvellously drunk on strange, magnificent, violent visions and possibilities, and had great black hangovers. And why not? You can learn a lot by imitating. Nowadays, I'm less interested in art with a capital A, more and more anachronistic, anti-intellectual, anti-highbrow." And how he hated the pseudo-intellectual, the man of calculated culture.
He finds that talk of music, books, and art is useful at all the most important parties. He cultivates an aptitude for knowing which way the day's aesthetic wind is blowing. He lacks all passion, feels no love or hate, notes what is up to what is out of date, is equally prepared to praise or damn, so long as he can coin an epigram. Spying the coming man before he's come, he beats the first premonitory drum. Aware which reputation's almost dead, he plans the funeral speech a year ahead. His seismographic needle will betray a falling fashion half the world away. Yet good and bad in art are one to him, mirror of mode and weathercock of whim. Established in his eminence of taste, this little man has little time to waste. And so the only books at which he looks are books on books, or books on books on books. He shines, but shines with cold, reflected light, bold without risk, derivatively right, lame but for crutches, but for prompters dumb, index of others, every summary's sum, rich by much robbing, smart at second hand, builder with borrowed bricks on shifting sand, reaper of fields dug deep by earlier spades, echo of echoes, shadower of shades.
His poetry is never obscure, is readily understood on a first hearing, but is always to be returned to for its deeper insights. A good example of his Imagist poetry, though perhaps such labelling is no longer necessary, is his poem Flight of Stairs.
Stairs fly as straight as hawks, or else in spirals, curve out of curve, pausing at a ledge to poise their wings before relaunching. Stairs sway at the height of their flight, like a melody in Tristan, or swoop to the ground with glad spread of their feathers before they close them. They curiously investigate the shells of buildings, a hollow core, shell in a shell. Useless to produce their path to infinity, or turn it to a moral symbol, for their flight is ambiguous, upwards or downwards as you please. Their fountain is frozen, their concertina is silent.
Had he been born a decade or two earlier, he might have given some backbone to the Georgian poets, and found himself alongside A. Housman and Rupert Brooke, whose poetry he much admired at a time when it was considered outmoded. His short poem, Two Men in a Dance Hall, could have been written for a couple of Shropshire lads whooping it up in Ludlow.
Tom laughs, is free and easy, and girls obey his call, for whether they obey it he hardly cares at all. But Edward burns with longing, and angry, anxious pain cries from his eyes, too loudly, too eagerly, in vain.
And some of his romantic poems echo the Rupert Brooke of When Love Has Changed to Kindliness.
This is not love, perhaps. Love that lays down its life, that many waters cannot quench, nor the floods drown, but something written in lighter ink, said in a lower tone. Something perhaps especially our own. A need at times to be together and talk, and then the finding we can walk more firmly through dark, narrow places, and meet more easily nightmare faces. A need to reach out sometimes hand to hand, and then find earth less like an alien land. A need for alliance to defeat the whisperers at the corner of the street. A need for inns on roads, islands in seas, halts for discoveries to be shared, maps checked and notes compared. A need at times of each for each, direct as the need of throat and tongue for speech.
Two poems which were not published until soon after his death tell us more about the man than any formal biography. The first of them, called The Ad Man, which appeared in the Times Literary Supplement, is a devastating expose of the whole ethos of advertising, and at the same time a confession of self-loathing for being mixed up in it, not made any the less bitter by the realization that he was biting the hand that fed him and his poetry.
This trumpeter of nothingness, employed to keep our reason dull and null and void, this man of wind and froth and flux will sell the wares of any who reward him well. Praising whatever he is paid to praise, he hunts for ever newer, smarter ways to make the gilt seem gold, the shoddy silk, to cheat us legally, to bluff and bilk by methods which no jury can prevent, because the law's not broken, only bent. This mind for hire, this mental prostitute, can tell the half-lie hardest to refute, knows how to hide an inconvenient fact and when to leave a doubtful claim unbacked, manipulates the truth, but not too much, and if his patter needs the human touch, then aptly artless, artfully naive, he wears his fickle heart upon his sleeve. He takes ideas and trains them to engage in the long little wars big combines wage. He keeps his logic loose, his feelings flimsy, turns eloquence to cant and wit to whimsy, trims language till it fits his client's pattern, and styles a glossy tart or slimping slattern. He uses words that once were strong and fine, primal as the sun and moon and bread and wine, true, honourable, honoured, clear and clean, and leaves them shabby, worn, diminished, mean. Where our defence is weakest, he attacks. In circling reason's fort, he finds the cracks. He knows the hopes and fears on which to play. We who at first rebel, at last obey. We who have tried to choose, accept his choice. Tired, we succumb to his untiring voice. The drip, drip, drip makes even granite soften. We trust the brand name we have heard so often, and join the queue of sheep that flock to buy. We fools who know our folly, you and I.
He was in the very top class of copywriters and much sought after, But it's hardly surprising that that poem did not appear until he was no longer in the business. One of his most successful assignments was for a well-known firm of shoe manufacturers, and this example of his art, and it was an art before it was debased by the TV commercial, is full of echoes of his poetry.
The girl who wanted the moon in her hand. Once upon a time there was a girl who had been invited to go dancing one night in December. Then, if never again, she wanted the moon in her hand and the world at her feet. The world and one man especially. She found the dress in Paris, the stockings, the perfume, and the shoes. The shoes were in her mind's eye, light and slight as air, slim and young and soft, white and gold and gleaming. We found her the shoes, golden strapped, feather-light but firm, held firm by the fine-spun strength of white nylon mesh. Shoes to dance in till dawn.
The other poem, in the sharpest possible contrast, is called Heaven. Tessimond had no very strong political views beyond a benevolently left-wing bias, and his religious feelings were towards an equally benevolent agnosticism. He decided to leave any serious consideration of the great questions until the rat race was over. But a sudden fatal cerebral hemorrhage deprived him of such a necessity. Even so, it would be nice to think that he is safely ensconced, his umbrella deposited at the entrance gate, in the companionable heaven of his imagination.
In the heaven of the God I hope for, call him X, there is marriage and giving in marriage and transient sex for those who will cast the body's vest aside soon, but are not yet wholly rarefied and still embrace. For X is never annoyed or shocked, has read his Jung and knows his Freud. He gives you time in heaven to do as you please, to climb love's gradual ladder by slow degrees, gently to rise from sense to soul, to ascend to a world of timeless joy, world without end. Here on the gates of pearl there hangs no sign limiting cakes and ale, forbidding wine. No weakness here is hidden, no vice unknown. Sin is a sickness to be cured, outgrown with the help of a God who can laugh, an unsolemn God who smiles at old wives' tales of iron rod and fiery hell, a God who is more at ease with bawds and falstaffs than with Pharisees. Here the lame learn to leap, the blind to see, tyrants are taught to be humble, slaves to be free. Fools become wise, and wise men cease to be bores. Here bishops learn from lips of backstreet whores, and white men follow black-faced angels' feet through fields of orient and immortal wheat. Villon, Lautrec and Baudelaire are here. Here Swift forgets his anger, Poe his fear. Napoleon rests. Columbus, journeys done, has reached his new Atlantis, found his son. Verlaine and Dylan Thomas drink together. Marx talks to Plato. Byron wonders whether there's some mistake. Wordsworth has found a hill that's home. Here Chopin plays the piano still. Wren plans ethereal domes, and Renoir paints young girls as ripe as fruit, but not yet saints. And X, of whom no coward is afraid, whose friend consulted, not fierce king obeyed, who hears the unspoken thought, the prayer unprayed, who expects not even the learned to understand his universe, extends a prodigal hand full of forgiveness over his promised land.
And surely, in such a delectable place, he would by now have found that perfect companion for eternity, who he foreshadowed in a poem which he simply called She.
No more time or place, once I see her face. Sorrow, doubt, and fear leave when she is near. Warm, her eyes and hand wordless understand. She, although away, stays with me all day, in, below, behind, blood and heart and mind. She is where I go, she is all I know. Goal and map, to her I relate, refer all experience, feeling, thought and sense. Each discovery is a prize to be shown to her one day, something I can lay proud before her feet, something to repeat, new discovered door we may find once more. Every day's begun, charted by her sun. All I shall not share, who knows when or where, with her, and retaste by her side, is waste.
That was Portrait of a Romantic, an anthology of John Tessimond's poetry, compiled and presented by H. Colin Davis. The readers were Rosalind Shanks and Gabriel Woolf. Portrait of a Romantic was produced by John Theocaris.